Okay.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hello, hello.
Hello.
Hello. Good to see everyone. Everybody's getting logged on here. So feeling pretty good. I hope everybody's having an awesome day. Staying warm.
No one is staying warm. I don't think anyone's warm today.
Nobody's warm. Well, hopefully warm hard and we'll get through this. Laura, is this Read AI meeting notes? Is that you guys?
That is not us. It may be someone of our participants.
Okay.
I'm just gonna try to grab Session Lab agenda.
Hello, everyone. We'll just give it a few moments for everyone to log on here. While everybody's logging on, if you want to please just go ahead and put your name in the chat, your organization as well. That way we can ensure that you're included on the minutes. Wonderful, thank you. Just giving it a few more minutes here to welcome everybody in. All right. All right, for those that are just coming in, go ahead and please enter your name and organization into the chat. And we'll get started. All right, well, let's go ahead and we will call the first meeting of 2025 for the Chicago Wilderness Alliance to order. I'd like to welcome everybody here this afternoon. This is a new time. Normally we've met in the morning, and we're mixing it up this year by putting it in the afternoon with the intent of alternating our meetings and having two that are hybrid, such as this. Well, this is not a hybrid, we're all online, but a hybrid for two of our meetings where we can be in person or remote, and having that opportunity to get together, and we'll have that, and then an online meeting towards the end of the year. I'm Elizabeth Kessler, and I'm serving as chair of the Alliance, and I'm the executive director for the McHenry County Conservation District, and it's my honor to welcome everybody here today. And what I'd like to do is just go around the room so we can make some formal introductions pretty quickly. And I'm going to turn it over, just pass it on to another one of our partners here. So Victoria.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you can hear me okay. Victoria Wittig. I am the ambassador of the Northwest Indiana Urban Waters Federal Partnership and currently serve as vice chair of the Chicago Wilderness Alliance. And I will hand it on over to Mark.
Hi, everybody. I'm Mark Bowman. I'm the treasurer for the Chicago Wilderness Alliance, and I recently retired from the Field Museum. I'll hand it off to Ted.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Ted Hafner, and my hat today is the coordinator of the goal groups for the Green Vision Initiative. I will hand it to Maria.
Hi, everyone. I'm Maria Sadowski. I'm a communications consultant, and Chicago Wilderness is one of my clients. And I will hand it off to Maggie, please.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. This is Maggie Jones from Stantec. How about Melissa?
Should be ready for that. Hi, I'm Melissa Kustik. I am the CWA partner. Sorry, I should have had this prepared. Partnership Engagement Committee chairperson alongside Drew Hart, and I am also the education manager for the Illinois Landscape Contractors Association. And since I said Drew's name, if he's in here, I'll hand it off to him.
Thanks, Melissa. And yeah, excited to be sharing the Partnership and Engagement Committee with Melissa for the Chicago Wilderness Alliance. I'm Drew Hart with the U.S. Forest Service in our urban and community forestry program serving the Chicago region. And let's see, not sure who's gone or not gone, but what about Chris from Shirley Hines? Have you gone, Chris?
Hello, everyone. Chris Kraus, Executive Director at Shirley Hines Land Trust, and I'll pass it off to Deborah.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Deborah Walker Johnson, President of the Forest Preserve Foundation. This is my first meeting with you guys, and it's happy to be a part of it. And I don't know, Michelle.
Hi, I'm Michelle Blackburn, Forest Preserve District of Kane County. I'm the agricultural coordinator and hoping to fill in as the co-chair for Growing with Agriculture. And I'll give it off to Melissa.
Hey, I have an idea. Why doesn't everybody who hasn't gone just put your hand up? You raise your hand and
There you
then
go.
put it down. That's a great idea.
I'll go next. I haven't gone. Emily Reisberg, Vice President of Conservation and Policy at Open Lands, and I'll pass it to Paul.
I'm Paul Botts with the Wetlands Initiative here in Chicago, and I will pass it on to Adam.
Hi, everyone. I'm Adam Flicksher. I am the Planning Director for Friends of the Chicago River, and I'll pass it to Jack.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Jack Darren from Sierra Club. Good to be back and see you all in this new year. And I will pass it to Jeff. Hi.
Hi there. I'm Jeff Mengler. I work for Hayden Associates, and I will pass it to Bill.
I am Bill Miller, Professor Emeritus at Northwestern University, and I will pass it to Sergio.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sergio Vargas. I am the Policy Manager of Chicagoland Conservation for the Illinois Environmental Council, and I'll pass it over to Seth.
Hi, everybody. Sorry. Hi, I'm the director of the Urban Wildlife Institute at the Lincoln Park Zoo. I'm also the co-chair of the Wildlife Committee for Chicago Wilderness. I will pass it to Oliver.
Thank you. I'm Oliver Luke. I run Seek Solutions, and I will pass it to Amy.
I'm Amy. I'm the director with Friends of Illinois Nature Preserves, and I will pass it to Phil.
Hello, I'm Phil Nicodemus. I'm Research Director with Urban Rivers, as well as CWA Steering Committee member and co-chair of the Healthy Waters Group. I will pass it to Nathaniel.
Hello, I am Nathaniel Pilla with Midwest Biological Survey and also serve on the steering committee. And I'm calling from apparently the afterlife. And I will pass it to John.
Thanks. John Wasik from the Lake County Board and Forest Preserve.
And I will pass it to Vince.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. Vince Mosco with Hay and Associates and the Friends of Hackmatack National Wildlife Refuge.
Isaiah?
Oh, sorry, Amy.
That's okay.
Hey everyone, good afternoon. I'm Isaiah Ballinger. I'm the Fort Reserves of Cook County. I'm Deputy Director of Conservation Experiential Programming Department, and this is my first meeting. Happy to be here. I'll pass it to Lake.
Hi, I'm Lake Schulke. I'm the Program Assistant with Chicago Wilderness Alliance, and I'll be here taking notes. And I will pass it to Laura.
Hi, everybody. I'm Laura Riley. I'm the Managing Director of Chicago Wilderness Alliance, and I'm going to pass it to Jared.
Good afternoon, everyone. Jared O'Brien, private lands biologist with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in Northwest Indiana. First meeting, I'll pass it to Madeline.
Hi, I'm Madeline Tudor, a senior environmental social scientist with the Keller Science Action Center at the Field Museum. I will pass it to Noreen.
Thanks, Madeline. Hi, everyone. I'm Noreen Rana. I'm a senior project manager at the Chicago Park District in the Department of Cultural and Natural Resources, and I work primarily with our natural areas team. I will pass it to Vincent.
I already went. So, but Vince with Hay and Associates and Hackmatack. And then how about Amy Flansburgh?
Hi, my camera's not working, so apologies for that. I'm Amy Flansburgh with Stantec. This is also my first meeting, so I'm happy to be included. And I don't see if anyone else has their hand raised, so I might be last.
Okay, I'll call out Mark Bowman.
So I've already introduced myself, but I would like to, you may have seen in the chat that my colleague Laura Guderian has kind of lost her voice. So I'm introducing Laura, and I'm very glad to be doing that as she is attending her first meeting today as well.
Thank you. And we had a late addition, Jack. Do you want to give it a quick introduction?
I went if it's Jack Darren.
Oh, Jack Brunner.
Oh,
But
hey
thanks,
there.
Jack.
Jack Brunner, Tetra Tech. Hi, everybody. Sorry, I'm a little late.
No worries. Did we get everybody? Are we missing? If you have not yet introduced yourself, please do. Tim?
Tim Brennan, Vice President of Programs and Strategic Impact at Farm Foundation and one of the co-chairs of Growing with Agriculture.
Anyone else? All right. Thank you so much. Wonderful to see new faces here today, as well as others that have been long-term partners and all the organizations that we have. We've got a full agenda, and thank you, Laura, for putting this up on the screen there for everyone. We also have all the agenda on Session Lab with any of the materials that we're going to be going forward and discussing this afternoon. And thank you, you put the link there as well. So if you just came in and you have not put your name in the chat, please do so. So Lake can capture that all in our minutes. All right, as we hold these meetings, I just want to go over some just basic guidelines that we've been using. Part of our work is shared agreements that we want to be here to actively engage with one another and making sure that we all have the opportunity to speak. So using the features that we have available to us on Zoom. So just raising your hand or physically raising your hand, and we'll make sure that we're able to call on you. We're going to try to stay to our agenda, and always great to ask for clarifying questions. And if you want to know more, go ahead and ask those questions, and we'll work collaboratively to make sure that information is shared amongst us. All right, thank you. Next slide, Laura. All right, so our first order of business we have this afternoon is I need a motion to approve the agenda as presented. And actually, we're not using a consent agenda today because some of these items we're going to take them one by one, but just a motion to approve the agenda for today.
I'm Nathaniel. I make a motion to approve the agenda.
Thank you, Nathaniel. Do I have a second?
Second from Mark.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, any discussion or any additional adds from anyone on today's agenda? Hearing none, all those in favor, motion by saying aye.
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 And those, wonderful. And those opposed, nay? Okay, agenda is approved. And one of the things, just before I go into recognize some outgoing partners on the steering committee, as just a reminder, when we hold these executive council meetings, this is engaging. So the steering committee is a group that you're going to hear more about from our partnership and engagement committee that helps frame these meetings, but these meetings are actively engaged with everybody to be participation. That means you get to vote, you get to bring things forward. Just so for those that are new with us, everybody has a voice here as members of the executive council, because that's how the alliance works, is the work of the collective. With that being said, I do want to thank two of our outgoing steering committee members that have both retired from the field, and we're going to hope to keep them involved as ambassadors to the Alliance and our great work. So thank you, Mark. He has been serving as treasurer, and Kathy Garrity has been serving as an at-large member. So we wish them well and thank them for their service. Next slide, please. All right, it's my pleasure to introduce to you two of our alliance partners and leaders who have stepped up to take a really important role that's been in our strategic initiatives, and that is to develop a new partnership and engagement committee. And so I'd like to welcome Drew Hart from U.S. Forest Service, and Melissa Kusick from the Illinois Landscape Contractors Association to present, to give an introduction and present the nomination slate.
Thanks, Elizabeth. And it might just be my speakers, but your sound's a little muffled. Just a heads up in case there's a microphone to move.
Thank you.
So thank you for having us. Drew and I have interviewed a handful of candidates who have submitted their interest or who have talked to steering committee members in the last several months about their interest in joining. And we have 3 candidates that we would like to put forward. And all 3 of them are on this call. So I can give a little bit of background, but I think it might be nice for them to have a chance to, do a 1-minute background on why they were interested in this position. Sorry to put you all on the spot. I didn't tell you ahead of time that's going to happen. The first candidate we are suggesting is Deborah Walker Johnson. She's with the Forest Preserve Foundation. Deborah, did you want to give a 1-minute background on?
Sure. Yeah, so I am interested. I've attended a couple of your meetings, and I've been at the Forest Preserve Foundation. It'd actually be 4 years in March, and I've spent the past few years just getting up to speed, understanding the industry. And so I'm interested in participating in the steering committee, especially with Kathy Garrity leading the Forest Preserves of Cook County. I have a huge background. I've done a lot of advocacy work, fundraising, program development, and have been board chair and chaired several committees. And I just feel like this will help in getting me up to speed and being able to be a large contributor to the organization as well. So I am thanking you for this opportunity.
Thanks, Deborah. The second person we have up for nomination is Isaiah Ballinger. Isaiah, if you would like to give just a 1-minute introduction.
Yeah. Hey, everyone. I'm Isaiah Ballinger. I worked with a few of y'all in the past. I've been kind of in the area for the past 14 years, working at various orgs that are here represented today at the Field Museum, Chicago Park District, Cosley's, a lot of on Great Lakes. And I'd like to bring all my experiences in land restoration and also community engagement to this committee. Happy to be here.
Thank you. And then our third candidate is Laura Guderian. Laura, you've apparently lost your voice. Mark, I don't know if you want to, on her behalf, or in the chat, Laura, if you'd prefer to just.
Yeah, sure, Laura. Maybe you can say a few words in the chat. I'll just say that Laura currently is in Portland, Oregon, as she's wrapping up affairs there, has been working with the Portland Park District and moves to Chicago. She's at mid-transition. We're excited to have her. She's a native of the region and is a specialist in turtles as well as being a good conservation leader.
Thank you. And with that, Elizabeth, is this the moment to read the installation of officers, or do we need to do anything more formal?
So the only thing I will say is we do through the process, we do have individuals moving up to officer seats as well as those in officers re-upping to continue in those seats as well. And with that, I would entertain for you to read the oath of office to the 2025 Steering Committee.
All right, glad to do it. Members of the 2025 Steering Committee, do you affirm to faithfully and impartially discharge the duties of your position as Steering Committee members to the best of your knowledge and ability, and pledge to support and advance the mission and green vision of the Chicago Wilderness Alliance?
I do.
Yeah,
I do.
Yeah. Again, in unison, just kidding. Congratulations and thank you for your leadership and commitment of the Chicago Wilderness Alliance.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Melissa. Thank you, Drew. And thank you for everyone that stepped up to be considered for this. And I believe the Partnership and Engagement Committee is also going to be working on onboarding and setting some standards that we'll be able to use to make sure that everybody is all good to go in these new roles. And I'm just grateful for your leadership. So thank you, everyone. All right, we'd like to welcome new partners. So we have as our first new partner to the Alliance, the American Society of Landscape Architects, our Illinois chapter. And then we also have the Mike McDonald Photography Inc. as our second new partner that's joined us. Welcome. We're glad to have you here with us. All right, the next item of business. Can everybody hear me better? Oh, a little bit, not so much, huh?
You are,
All right,
you do sound better. You do sound better, yes. But
okay,
it's,
it's still a little bit. I apologize. I will take a motion to approve the Executive Council minutes from the October 16th meeting.
So moved.
Thank you, Emily. Is there a second?
Second, Jack Brunner. Hi.
Thank you, Jack. Okay, first and second, any discussion? There being none, all those in favor of approving the minutes, motion by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, nay. Motion, the minutes are approved. Next item, we have our treasurer's report. I'm going to turn this over to Mark Bowman.
Thanks. Is there a slide for this, or it's attached to the minutes? I'll just say that you can open that up in the minutes and see how we did in November and December, and then how we ended the year. So just big picture, we ended the year $22,000 ahead of where we began the year. And that is the 7th year in a row that that's happened since our fund balance on December 31st, 2017 was $33,000, $33,600, and probably the pennies that we counted as well. And it's now $479,682. And for context, our budgeted 2025 that we approved in October, that we just approved those minutes, is $319,000. So we ended this year with $323,000 in revenue, $301,000 in expenses. We assume that we can kind of hit those targets again for 2025. And so I feel like we're in pretty good shape. One other point I would say here, we're running a little behind at the moment on partner dues. If you look at 2023, at this point, we'd taken in $122,000 of our $300,000-ish revenue was dues, and that's 80,000 so far. But I would just point out, November, as you'll hear in the meeting today, November and December have been super active for partners as well as for the Alliance leadership. And so we anticipate we'll hit the dues amount in the first couple of months of the year. Congress was spectacular and also did pretty well financially. So it's basically the report. And actually, once we were done with Congress in the month of December, our dues last year, December 23, was only 10,000 came in that month. This year it was 30,000. So that's an indication that it's starting to pick up. And that's basically the report. Happy to entertain any questions. The documents are attached to the session lab, and you can go look at them, and I'm happy to respond to questions by email later too, if you'd like to. So I submit this for approval.
Thank you. So moved by our treasurer, Mark Bowman. Do I have a second?
Second, Jack Runner.
Thank you, Jack. So we have it moved second. Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor, motion by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, nay. All right, it carries. Thank you so much, Mark. And you did an awesome job in summarizing where we've been. And I will also just underscore, as you did, with the level of engagement. And when we put forth our budget, which we approve at the October meeting, and we work together to place that, we have been making more investments into the program side of the Alliance. And this last year, adding on additional support to help us with our initiatives. And we end up still with those investments and with those grants that are being awarded and the partnership growth that we're able, and that's how we're building on our reserve. So we are making those investments, and this upcoming budget for 2025 does show us going into reserves with investments. But if our history shapes with sponsors and all the great work, we continue to be strong. So thank you. Thank you for that great work, Mark. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Laura and Victoria to talk about Congress.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Victoria, if it's all right, I'll just kind of do a quick run through the numbers, and then please, I'd love to have you round out that report. We were thrilled to welcome over 688 attendees this year. Those of you who were there knew that we had over 30 sessions with 119 speakers, and we were welcomed a Whova platform, which allowed people to message each other and share videos and posts and connect through that platform. We had over 30 partner volunteers, 16 sponsor tables, amazing food and staff, and 2 field trips, one to the Calumet region and one to Northwest Indiana, that were filled at capacity. And an amazing number of volunteers, 40 from the PNW, Purdue University Northwest. There's some photos that capture the day if you weren't able to join us. I think this one may get a little redundant, but we wanted to be able to share that a thank you to both our sponsors, and we will have a link to the video highlights for the day in this slide deck, which will be shared on our session lab and also linked to our website. Here's some of the feedback that we received. By and large, most folks were really happy to have the networking and the sessions to connect with one another. Also, really positive feedback on the field days. What we were really excited about is that there was a younger, more diverse audience, and many people were able to thank us for keeping our costs low so that their staff could attend at all levels. And we had many first-time attendees this year. And just another shout out to our sponsors. And Victoria, if you want to touch on anything that I missed, I just wanted to show some visuals.
Oh, no, I think you've covered it, Laura. It was an amazing experience for all involved. And I'm already starting to think about the next Congress and whether or not the theme is going to be to celebrate the anniversary of the Chicago Wilderness Alliance, which could be pretty incredible. But really just an open invitation to everyone on the Executive Council and your staff to think about leaning in to help plan the next amazing Congress and keep us headed in a upward and onward direction. Thanks, Laura.
Thanks, Victoria. And with that, I'd like to welcome Ted Hafner, the Green Vision Initiative Coordinator.
Hello again, everybody. So I'm going to give you sort of a year-end snapshot of the GVI teams and where they ended up. Next slide, please, Laura. So if you're not familiar with the GVI teams, we have 7 as of a couple weeks ago, now 8. The mapping team, the GIS team, has joined the Green Initiative program, not just as the collective hub, but as an official goal team, which we're very excited about. But this just gives a description of each team. And then the next slide, I will be talking about this dashboard I created. Go ahead, Laura. That looks at sort of the overall tenor and stature of each team. The first one is sort of leadership. It's a pretty simple metric there. Green for 2 co-leads, yellow for 1 lead, and red for no leads. I think we started this line off at like 4 greens for the year, and we're pretty close to getting a lot. Sorry, I think we start off with 1 or 2 greens this year, and we're pretty close to getting 4. The next line is sort of energy. Most of the goal groups have really good energy. The big change here is goal group 4, which you'll hear a little bit about later. The protection group was moved from a yellow to a green in terms of energy, as well as discussion, which is the next line item down. And then the last one is sort of just a gauging of financial strength and where we think each group could be if they went after grants and whatnot. I'll get into that in a little bit in a second, but a quick summary at the bottom. When I started this initiative in Q2, we had 5 greens, 20 yellows, 7 reds, and now we stand at 15, 15, and 2. So I'm pretty happy with the progress that the goal teams have made this year. That was the big sort of emphasis on my part for coordination is getting a good suite of leaders in place and figuring out the topics for where to take them and the energy. And I think we've done that. We have work to do, and you'll see that coming up. Next slide, please, Laura. So some more Congress numbers for you. We had 2 field trips with about 80 people total that really highlighted a lot of the GVI work, which was really nice to see. We had 5 GVI initiative presentations specifically. So that was really nice to see, and they were all really well attended. I got to 3 of the 5. And the hub had a really nice workshop, which everybody was pretty excited about. And then one of the numbers that I wasn't so excited about was this bottom one where we only captured 14 new GVI members. Mostly that was, I think, because the table that I had didn't have a nice sign saying sign up here to get involved or something like that. Otherwise, we were happy with the system. There were some kinks, but I think we can iron those out for next Congress. And it certainly was a lot better engagement than the last Congress, where it was sort of up to every GVI lead to sort of follow up on their own. For this Congress, I had letters written for everybody, every goal team, and they went out to all the people that we captured through the QR codes. So pretty successful. in terms of Congress, but not great capturing numbers, which I would like to improve the next go around. Next slide, please, Laura. One of the highlights of this year is the Group 4 protection work, which I think you will hear about later. This is brand new and literally hot off the presses. We tested this about an hour ago with this group, and I think there were some good comments and positive responses, and Amy Dahl will get into that a little bit later, but I wanted to highlight this because this I think is really exciting work in terms of policy, protection, and advocacy. Next slide, please, Laura. Another goal group I want to highlight is the increasing equitable access to nature. If you are really paying attention, this is a funny one because they have no lead right now, which is sort of a misnomer. We have an advisor in Danny Aboud, but we have continued along with our education program. So you see the Parker McMillan Bushman that we ran early in 2024, and the Indian Country 101 cohort 1, which we ran in the fall, is sort of an unofficial test. But we're going to start up again for cohort 2 in, gosh, like 3 weeks, a month, Laura, something like that. And I think you'll get into that later, right?
Yes, yes, I will. Thank you.
But that goal group continues to shine with a lot of energy and a lot of good opportunities there. Next slide, please. Okay, so I want to talk about the year ahead a little bit. So for the near term, we have already put in one grant focused on the hub, and that was to the IDNR Coastal Management Program. We'll see what happens there, but we asked for a lot of resources for the hub, and this should, you know, we may not get it, but in the past they've funded other GIS projects, so we feel pretty good about that. In a week or so, 10 days, not even, we have the Native-Led Climate Summit coming up at the Cook County Forest Preserves. That is sold out. That is looking phenomenal. I've been on the planning group for that, and kudos to everybody who showed up to help support this initiative. I think it's going to be a really amazing day of presentations, so much so that when we started this out, it was kind of rocky. There was a lot of silence. What are we going to do? How's this going to work? But in our last planning meeting, there were some questions and subtle discussions about, okay, when's the next one? Which I was really glad to hear. This is also hot off the presses. We have our GBI coordinating meeting on the 31st of this month. And I think we have close to perfect attendance for that. I think we're only missing one co-lead. So I'm really excited about that. I tried that back when I first got started, and I think we had 3 attendees. So I think that in and of itself shows some of the momentum that we've garnered over the last year. And then the last sort of near-term goal that I have is to relaunch the Equitable Access Group. We're talking to Danny about what some of those things might look like. We have a whole list of interested parties that we got from Congress and other sort of informal calls where we've been trying to hash this out, Laura and I. So we're looking forward to finding a date in February, March for that relaunch as well. Focal issues for the year. You saw a lot of yellows for co-leads, so I'd like to get some co-leads involved. There are a couple of us that are there all by ourselves, and you know, CWA best practices say that we should have at least 2 co-leads for each group because it can be a lot of work, and there's you know, an aspect of misery loves company, so to speak. Another focal issue for this year is metrics. The hub has some metrics for the goal groups. I think those can stay. They're pretty good, but they might want to be looked at because they're a couple years old now. But there are a number of goal groups that don't have metrics, and we were able to put some of this focus into the IDNR grant. was upcoming, or we just put in. And then the two other focal issues are the hub and the CAPN. You'll hear a little bit more about the CAPN later. But one of the things I forgot on the near term is if you look up to the fifth line, the Great Lakes TCGM grant, we're going to put in both for the hub and CAPN. And that's due in like another 10 days. So it's a busy January. It's the start of a busy year, but we have energy and a little bit of excitement. And that's my, I think, report for you guys. I'm happy to take questions if there's time. But it's been a fun 6 to 9 months of being the coordinator of these initiative groups, and I think they deserve a big hand because they've done a lot of great work.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ted, for your leadership and pulling this all together. Many moving parts, a lot of energy and enthusiasm, great work happening and pulling it all together, right? And so we can share that progress. I believe you're also continuing looking for others that are here that want to lean in and help if they're not necessarily a co-lead, but can join those GBI teams.
Certainly,
correct?
anybody's welcome to any topic, and we have those meetings on the CW calendar. And so you know when they're coming up. Some meet quarterly, some meet monthly, and somewhere in between.
Did anyone have any particular questions? I know we're going to dive a little bit deeper into some of the stuff as the meeting goes on. Looking for hands, anybody? I'm not seeing any, Ted.
I'm not seeing any.
So if you do, put something in the chat and we'll circle back to you and we'll keep our eye on that. So terrific.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ted. All right, let's move on to the next item. And I just wanted to provide a brief update on the climate action for people and nature. And as everyone may be familiar, the Chicago Wilderness Alliance engaged our work with Collaborative Connections to help us with what was phase one. And we had many key stakeholders that were involved. We took this back under the Alliance and working with Collaborative Connections to really build a framework with community underrepresented conservation focused areas, underserved, indigenous peoples, et cetera. And phase one was identifying, who would be serving on this co-design team to take it into the next phase of the process. So I can report at a very high level that the steering committee met with our CAPN group over the months of November and December and early January. And we are in the process of reframing what would be the next phase for this process of working with the co-design team and to review kind of in a short term what the next steps would be. So we'll look forward to having something to report to everybody soon, communicate wise, and then be able to have something to share with everybody. We're hopeful at the April meeting. There also has been some discussion by the steering committee as you may be aware of, CMAP is updating their climate action plan and how we can, converse with them and ensure that nature-based solutions are part of this process. And then also working with representatives of our communities that may not have been at the table for those conversations as well. So more to come on this. Okay, next slide. Okay, Laura, I'm going to turn this one over to you.
Thank you so much. As we mentioned earlier, we are getting ready to start our next cohort. Sorry, the slide didn't get updated. In collaborations with the Nature Conservancy, we undertook a plan to promote the free online training called Indian Country 101 in conjunction with the Whitener Group. These trainings were supported by a grant from the Illinois Department of Natural Resources, Urban and Community Forestry Program, and the U.S. Forest Service. Our first cohort started in September and was completed in December. And our next cohort is starting in February and will complete in April. And we have about 10 spots left for that. So if you're interested, or your colleagues or staff are interested, please email me and I would be happy to add them to the list. And it's just an online training. There are some guided reading experiences, and then we're able to kind of discuss those in a learning journey and do that work together. In addition, we touched upon the Native Led Climate Summit. That summit is sold out. It's being held at Thatcher Woods this Saturday. But we hope to share out some of the lessons learned from that, and thank Trickster Cultural Center for really taking the lead on this with the McHenry County Conservation District. And then we also are continuing. We have another year of our free online trainings that we did with Parker McMillan Bushman. You simply have to register for those, and you have access to the discussions and the Padlet and all the resources that are contained there. And that's an update on our equity and cultural resources.
Thank you, Laura, for that. Any questions from anyone on our work on that front? Again, thank you for everybody that's been supporting and sponsoring those efforts. And then it's my pleasure now. We have a partner spotlight, and Tim Brennan, who is co-leading our Growing with Agriculture, is going to make a presentation to the group. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you. And Laura, I've got a slide deck to share, so I don't know if I can just share that.
Yes, I'll stop sharing and you can go ahead.
So thank you so much for this opportunity. Thank you for giving me this spotlight. And so what I have to say will, I think, resonate with some of you. For others of you, you'll say, well, duh. But I have to tell you that from my world, which is the world of agriculture, a lot of what I'm going to share is going to feel radical. It's going to feel like I'm sounding an alarm, and I'm glad to sound like that. I have increasingly over the past year started to put a lot of threads together to understand what's happening within our region in terms of climate change and the effect that that's going to have on agriculture. And I think, like most people in ag over the past decade or so, I think there was an acknowledgement of, yes, climate change is real. Yes, climate change is happening on our farms. But I don't think there's ever been a moment where we've said climate change is really forcing us to drastically change what we're doing or how we're growing food. But I think most relevantly over the past few years, and especially the next 4 or 5 that we're looking at, are going to radically reshape food and agriculture. And I wanted to take this opportunity to share with you just some of my thinking and my ideas about this, and where I think Chicago Wilderness and all of the organizations that are a part of it can have positive contributions to what's going on. And so I call this a change of plans, climate change and agriculture in the Great Lakes region. And I will say I'm looking at and talking about the entire Great Lakes region, not just the Chicago Wilderness, although we make up a good portion of this. So again, in the stuff that you already know category, this is the largest freshwater watershed on the planet, 94,000 square miles of water. The states, of course, Illinois, Wisconsin, Minnesota, New York, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Michigan, as well as the Canadian provinces of Quebec and Ontario, all fall within that. That wonderful water is supported by extremely fertile glacial lands that left behind lots of organic matter as well as minerals, making this obviously one of the most important commodity growing regions in the United States, primarily corn, soybean, and wheat. We do also still produce a significant amount of dairy, which is about 15% of the US dairy production. I will say that has fallen significantly though over the last 50 years. There are also really interesting microclimates within these regions that allow us to grow a variety of different crops: blueberries, cherries, asparagus, sugar beets. We could go on and on about the different specialty crops, but all of those are pretty much a drop in the bucket compared to the commodity crops that we grow in the Great Lakes region. I would say Michigan being the exception. Michigan is still pretty firmly built on specialty crop production. There's also livestock production, but I would say that has decreased significantly since the 1980s. There's been a desire to bring some of that back, but for the most part, commodity crops are pretty much part of that $14.5 billion that we contribute annually to the US economy in terms of agricultural sales. So over the past 75 years, there's been constant change. You know, the past 100 years, when you put in mechanization and chemicalization, everything that's happened, but we've gone from small farms that can sustain themselves with 100 acres or more to farms that require a minimum of 2,000 acres in order to be successful. We've gone from sustenance farming to large commodity crop farming. All of that depends on a robust trade program. American farmers, particularly in the 1990s, spent a great deal of their own resources to travel to places like China, to open up new markets, to negotiate trade agreements, to create new markets in terms of ethanol and other products that have allowed these commodity crops to become the predominant form of agriculture in the United States. But of course, that all began to change during the pandemic, and most noticeably here in Chicago, as with most large metropolitan areas, we quickly realized we could not feed ourselves. Even though we are part of the breadbasket of America, whatever you want to call it, there were no fresh fruits and vegetables grown at the scale necessary to feed Chicago. And this was my first aha moment that I had. Chicago used to be fed by primarily the south suburbs. It was South Holland and Alsip, Crete. Lots of these villages were built on truck farms that produced fruits and vegetables on a daily basis and provided them to the city of Chicago. We have now evolved where most of our fruit and vegetables come from not only out of state, but out of the country. Most of our vegetables are coming from Mexico and as far as Argentina. Limited things such as lettuces and other things come from California and Arizona. But of course, we know that that is an unsustainable system that is very quickly shrinking. We add things like rising sea levels, more frequent and extreme weather events, hurricanes, wildfires. You know, we're all well aware of what climate change is doing to us. Temperature changes are becoming so significant that migration, climate migrants, are being driven to areas like southwestern Wisconsin. The Driftless region is being purchased. A lot of land there is being purchased by beef farmers from South Texas who can no longer raise their beef cattle in the temperatures there. They require cooling now in order to be fed. They're not gaining weight. They're not doing well under the extreme heat conditions. And so these cattlemen have been looking for new places to start their businesses. Southwest Wisconsin was desirable. It's not particularly good for crop production, but it's good for grazing. And of course, they have the one most valuable thing, and that's water, access to water. Skip ahead here. So these are just some basic trends that I had found in terms of the average air temperature and how it has changed in this region. So since 1951, and I know most of you are aware of this, we've gone up by 2.3%, which doesn't seem significant. But if you look at what's going to happen by 2050, which is up 3 to 6%, possibly more, and then by the end of the century, anywhere from 6 to 11% hotter. Along, of course, with air temperatures, that raises water temperatures, which changes things significantly in the Great Lakes. We see things like algae blooms, all sorts of effects of this. The northern parts of this region may not see the big changes, but certainly if you see on that map, Chicagoland, Ohio, Indiana, we're sort of looking better than others in that there will be sort of slower change and more consistency. It will not be as severe as in the West Coast or the Southeast. This is a map from NASA Harvest. If you're not familiar with NASA Harvest, I would encourage you to take a look at them. They do some really important mapping for food and agriculture. This is their prediction of what production across the world will look like in 2070. These are corn yields. Red being the areas where corn yields will be significantly decreasing. Green are the only areas where production is likely to increase. I find this map extremely concerning. And 2070 is not that far from today. Lots of the gray zones too can be interpreted as no production will be happening in those areas. So the effect of climate change on crops, I think this is an ongoing area of study that we're trying to figure out, but we do know that even though the growing seasons are longer, they're less predictable. We cannot predict rain. We have longer droughts. We have longer or more intense weather situations, more destructive water. It doesn't rain all day long. It rains in very hard, destructive ways that affect our topsoil. It affects a variety of things. We know there's been an increase in diseases, a decrease in beneficial insects, a rise of invasive insects, a rise of invasive plant species, high adaptation by particularly aggressive weeds like water hemp and a variety of other things. And then the other thing is global competition. As other areas can grow other things, there's more people entering the market. So as we've seen in South America, as they've torn down their jungles to build land to grow 2 crops a year. So, if I'm in Brazil, I can grow beans and corn, or I can double crop corn on extremely fertile soil. Obviously, it's not going to stay that way for a long time. But right now, the American farmer is no longer the leading farmer of commodity crops in the world. We have lost that to South America. We are not likely to ever regain that because we've also lost our primary customer, which was China. China bought most of our excess corn and soy primarily for animal feed. They, since the first Trump administration, began stepping back from those. They've made a few trade agreements since then that increased buying for a little bit, but they are now deeply committed to not buying from the US at all. They are more deeply invested in South America than ever before, and they're also reinvesting in Africa. 20 years ago, they made a lot of investments. They weren't successful in them. They kind of walked away from it, but now they're very much back in Africa because they see the same data and the same opportunities, and also their unwillingness to support American trade. So we have lost a partner. We're not likely to gain a bigger partner than that. I think there's a lot of hope right now that India might step in, but India is really protectionist when it comes to their agriculture and their farmers, not likely to replace that. Another important thing about climate change is the effect of soil and soil health. The soil microbiome is affected by the heat, deeply affected by the rainfall and moisture levels. We're seeing things like dust storms, which we have not seen in Illinois, but we saw them this past summer. We're likely to see them again. We're seeing a lot more contamination of soils due to flooding. In this area, particularly around the Great Lakes, sand is a big issue. So when creeks and brooks overflow, they dump their sand in fields, and that sand is usually, it costs more to remove it from that field than that field is probably worth. We're also seeing such variability with Great Lakes water levels. So what are the economic impacts? So we're projecting significant impacts in farm income and costs due to both the trade that I talked about, climate migration, and just the simple scarcity of inputs. The ability to buy things like potash and other necessary means of commodity production are getting harder and harder and a lot more expensive. Russia is no longer the primary provider of fertilizer ingredients. We have to go to China. There is a premium on all that. If we add tariffs on top of that, the American farmer is getting put in a position where his inputs and seed prices and machinery will cost much more than he's ever going to get out of those fields. Crop insurance has become a lot more expensive as weather has become more volatile. There are safety net programs, obviously, are a big part of the USDA strategy to help farmers, but those funds are distributed in a not productive way, often especially for small and mid-sized farmers. The big farmers tend to do okay, but we're starting to now see soaring land prices. The average land price here in Illinois, the last time I checked, was about $20,000 an acre for good farmland. That's just here in Will County, Champaign County. If you're a young farmer and you want to get into farming, I don't know how you're going to be able to do it at $20,000 an acre. Buying and selling water rights, this is turning up all over the place. People are making strategic purchases of land that allow them access to water. Some of that is for planning ahead. And also, competition for agricultural land versus housing and energy production. Tremendous amount of land being lost here in my county of Will County to energy production, to solar farms. So all of this is to say, what do we do about this now? I think that what we need to do is invest in helping our farmers at least begin some value add opportunities on their farm, helping them understand that the future of agriculture in the Great Lakes region is not corn and soy, that those markets are probably lost and not coming back. Now, that is not to say we're not going to produce corn and soy. We're probably going to produce different kinds for different purposes. So soy for biodiesel, corn for other types of feeds and oils and things like that. Biotech crops, biotech corn that have particular properties that somebody in the market is willing to pay for. But general commodity crops that are for export are likely not to be part of the American farm economy pretty soon. I'm not talking 20 years from now, I'm talking 20 months from now. We also need to work with economic development organizations to create a new regional markets for crops and products, which is to say, on my little farm down here in Crete, I put in 20 hazelnut trees a couple of years ago. And when those trees are ready and they're making a harvest, I don't have anywhere to sell them. There is not a marketplace here in this portion of the Great Lakes region that allows me to take a product that I've grown and sell it to a buyer. It's one thing if I have corn and soy, but there's anything else, whether it's apples, vegetables, there are no markets at the scale we need in this area. So that's something that we can do. We can build infrastructure to process new crops that are being made here. So if I'm growing hazelnuts or if I'm growing livestock, if I have chickens and I want to process them, there's no place to do that around here. But if we start investing in that infrastructure, farmers can begin to diversify. And within that diversification, we can get closer to our goals of regenerative agriculture and agriculture that is sustainable. I also believe farmland preservation is one of the most important things we can do. Conservation is important, but I believe when people get hungry and there's less and less food available in the store, I think land that has been set aside for conservation purposes can become the target of people saying, well, why aren't we growing food on that? Why is that land sitting there? And I think there's going to be a lot of pressure, and this is probably 25 or 30 years from now, but I think no land will be safe when the Great Lakes region becomes the most important vegetable and fruit growing region in America. I think all of our land is in danger. But I also think that the climate migrants, the people that are coming here, if you notice, Illinois was always in the news for our declining population. Well, surprise, this year that didn't happen. It went up. And a lot of that is people choosing to move to Illinois because Arizona and New Mexico and California are becoming harder and harder to live in. And so I just see that as a threat to land. So I think farmland preservation has to be a priority. It's just as important as parkland preservation or anything else. It's the land that will feed us. I also think we need state and multi-state strategic plans for agriculture that will ensure safe and consistent food supply. Land legacy programs. This is something my organization is looking into, how to transfer land from one generation to the next, especially to new and beginning farmers or farmers that are from underserved communities that don't have access to quality farmland. Your average farmer in Illinois, I believe the last I read, is 62 years old. Not a great position to be in right now. And there's not a whole lot of next generation that's willing to take on the farm the way that mom and dad built it. Couple of other things, just examining and revising state laws for buying and selling water rights. This is not my area of expertise. I know that's going on out there in some degree. You know, and I just think the competition for ag land versus housing and energy production really has to be part of our conversation. So, you know, quick takeaways. Climate change is here. It's already having a significant impact on agriculture and the value chain. The Great Lakes region will become the most, if not the one of, if not the most important growing regions in the U.S. and the world for a very long time. Once it gets too hot everywhere else, it's predicted that we will get warmer, but we'll stay consistent. It's not going to get to the point where we can't grow here. Climate migrants are already here. They're buying land and water. We also have some of the most talented and technology-focused farmers in the world, but they need help. They can and they will adjust to new production paradigms, but we need leadership on that. Without trade partners like China buying our excess commodity crops, the farm economy is going to continue to crumble. It's just bad news moving forward. Costs are too high. There aren't customers. It's going to end much worse than the 1980s did for farmers. I'd say it's not too late to make a plan. It's not too late for us to take action. And I think Chicago Wilderness can play a significant role in this, but I see this across all of the working groups. This is not just the Growing with Agriculture group. This is all working groups need to be involved in these issues. And I'll just leave you with my contact info. If you want to add me to your contacts, just scan that QR code and you'll get all my info. But that's all I had to share.
Thank you, Tim. Very informative. Appreciate the passion and a great message to share with all of us. Are you open to entertaining any questions from anyone?
Absolutely.
Anyone have any questions for Tim? Raise your hand.
I saw one on growing food underneath solar panels. I'd say yes, there's opportunity there, but I see a lot of really bad players. So here in Crete, I'm a planning and zoning officer, and we've had a half a dozen solar companies here, and each of them comes with a different agriculture plan. Most recently, they came and they said, we're going to put goats on there. And I'm like, you're not putting goats on there. Goats will destroy your solar panels. So I think there's a lot of misinformation out there in terms of solar. What we can use those panels for is they lower the temperature 1 to 2 to 3 degrees on the soil, which for some places that are getting hotter, this is an opportunity to grow vegetables that don't need as much sun. So things like lettuce, spinach, stuff like that can actually grow really well. I just believe that people are overselling that opportunity. At this point, we see sheep as being successful underneath them because sheep don't try to climb the way goats do. Cattle are too big and too clumsy. We also hear a lot about how, but these panels can be removed. It doesn't take the farmland out of permanent production. I don't know. We haven't seen the other end of it, so I'm less crazy about that idea. Mark, did you have a question? Oh,
I'll go first.
Emily, go first. Yeah.
I think that's what you were saying, Mark. I understood your mannerism. This was super interesting, Tim. I'm very excited about your presentation. Can you talk a little bit about how is Farm Foundation thinking about this, and how is this changing and shaping your strategy for the future, specifically in this Great Lakes region, and how can partners, or how do you hope Chicago Wilderness or other partners can support or fill in some of the gaps?
Right. So this, I would say within my organization, I am a radical voice, and I probably should have said at the beginning of this presentation, these are my opinions and not those of Farm Foundation. However, I keep testing this, right? So we met with the CEO of American Farmland Trust last week, and I took the opportunity to throw this at him, and he was 100% with me, and he vowed any resources they had he would provide to me, including the exclusive USDA data that only they have access to. Everybody I talked to, and so I just spent a week with a whole bunch of food and ag leaders in North Carolina, national ag leaders, and I kept testing this with everybody that I talked to. I have yet for any of them to tell me that I'm wrong, including farmers. but it's just that, what do? You're told that, everything that you've built, everything that you know how to do is no longer relevant, or it's not going to be relevant. What do you do? How do you churn that ship around? And I think what we can do, what I'm saying at Farm Foundation, is we at least can start the conversation. We can start gathering people together. We can bring some big groups together along with, we work a lot through the value chain. So we work with all kinds of food companies, everything else. I think if we can just start to ring this bell and say the strategic plan for the Great Lakes region must be written. We need to have something. Each state can write their own, but we need a big sort of broad thing. I'd say, we need some sort of funding for some of it, but I don't see this as a particularly expensive thing. We're not building anything. We're just building some coalitions to really recommend some serious action. There's also, we're a non-lobbying organization. We're going to need people to lobby across all of these states. To ensure that the states are investing in the infrastructure that's going to be necessary.
Thank you. Well, if you want Open Lands to come help talk to your colleagues, we're happy to do that.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Emily. Thank you, Mark. Did you have a follow-up? It looks like Emily addressed that. Anyone else? Otherwise, I am going to turn it over to our next presenter, Amy Dahl, who is leading up as one of our co-leads for protecting land for biodiversity conservation. Amy.
Thank you. Ted, do we have our PowerPoint queued up in there? Oh, good, we do. Okay, so I have been leading a conservation sort of strategy policy informal group for a couple of years, and we were meeting a couple of times a month on Wednesday mornings. And so then Ted and I started to have some conversation about how does this tie in with the work that CW does, and also what's happening with protecting healthy landscapes. And so that's where this started to come together for the purposes of Chicago Wilderness. So the group that I had been working with included partners from IEC and Prairie State Conservation Coalition, and some of you and your organizations on this call as well, and kind of ended up falling under the coalition of Illinois is Beautiful. And Ted, I think we can go to the next slide. Actually, I don't know who's controlling the PowerPoint. But what we discovered is that a lot of us were gathering in various coalition calls, and we were having a lot of coalition calls and maybe not quite as much action as we wanted to, but also were we being strategic, and were we at a place where we could welcome in new partners? And so my conversation with Ted in the fall was really helpful in thinking about how do we more clearly define the work that we're doing, the conversations that we're having around conservation policy, strategy, and legislation, so that we can invite people into the meetings that are relevant to them. And so what came out of that over the course of the last couple months of conversation and with Ted and with other partners at the Nature Conservancy and IEC is a series of meetings on a weekly basis, but with a different conservation focus each week, so that we know how to invite people into the work that's happening. So we kind of laid that out. We can go to the next slides. So you can see here where it falls in with the Illinois is Beautiful coalition that mostly is organized by Illinois Environmental Council, but with lots of different partners participating, has coalitions around healthy soils and waters, wetlands, floodplains, aquifers, and local food. But this work on our Wednesday morning group is the Natural Areas Protection and Stewardship group. And so that is how we've sort of laid it all out. And it includes work on power building and networking, conservation legislation and open space legislation, strategic land protection and stewardship, and development and regulatory issues. So that's kind of how we started to lay that out. And so we can go to the next slide. This just is an explanation of who is involved and who was involved in the conversations about how these coalitions kind of came together. I think especially what Lindsay Keeney and I had been working a lot on Prairie State Conservation Coalition, so PSCC's policy committee, and also thinking about how does all of this fit together from a policy, legislation, and strategy perspective. So where we landed, and I think that's on the next slide, is a series of meetings. So we moved them to Wednesday. We've had been meeting on Wednesdays twice a month. We moved it to 4 times a month, but with a specific focus each week so that we don't have people, so that people can come to the area of the coalition work that is relevant to them. The first week of the month will be the PSCC Policy Committee, thinking about building power and networking and coalition building and strengthening relationships with legislators. The second week of the month, we're looking at conservation legislation. The third week of the month, looking at topics related to strategic land protection and stewardship. And then the fourth Wednesday of the month, looking at development and regulatory issues. And we kind of flesh those out a little bit more in the next slide. And for this part, we simply, as we were meeting to talk about how do we lay out what weeks we talk about what, we were looking at what were the topics that we had been addressing as a group that was pretty informally structured, but what were the topics we'd been working on and thinking about and strategizing about, and how do they fall into these 4 buckets each week. So week 1, we'll really think about coalition building. How do we work with IDNR and our government partners, building our legislative champions, and then advocacy strategies around conservation. Week 2 was where it got a little bit more complicated. We found that this group and these meetings are really helpful in thinking through legislation and legislative issues that impact conservation. It was a group where ideas would come together, we would strategize and talk about it, and think about legislation that impacts conservation and conservation organizations. But really wanted to think about how do we shape this group. So we've looked at from January through May during the active legislation season, we just focus on updates to current legislation. If you're a member of Illinois Environmental Council, you'll know that they do a call every Friday during the legislative season to update folks on what's happening in Springfield with legislation. But what this group, the feedback we got from the group was that those were helpful if you already know how to speak the language of how a bill becomes a law and where things go. And there's not a lot of room and space in those meetings for those of us who are thinking about this from a conservation perspective to have any time for strategy or for, quite frankly, just asking the, I don't know how government works, dumb questions that we have. And so our Wednesday calls provide some space for that and for people to say, I have this idea, I don't know what to do with it, or I have this problem and I think there might be a legislative fix, and to strategize with people who have some experience with that, and also other people that may be experiencing the same sort of challenge. So during the first half of the year, we'll talk legislative updates. We even just had a meeting today, right before this, where we talked through what was happening in Springfield and what legislation had already been proposed. And also a little bit of the background about how we came to the legislation that actually ends up getting proposed and introduced by legislators. And then during the second half of the year, we'll think through, that will be the time of year to actually develop legislation and work with partners and build the coalitions and develop language and strategy around that. Week 3 is the week that is in alignment with the Chicago Wilderness Protecting Healthy Landscapes goal, but it will have a statewide and not just a Chicago Wilderness focus. But a lot of these things are relevant to statewide and especially, and of course in the CW region. Thinking about policy implementation, how are we following up and continuing to advocate after legislation has passed, and then also just strategic land protection and stewardship topics as they come up. And then week 4 is how we'll respond to regional or statewide advocacy issues or site-specific advocacy issues, places where we have opportunity to make public comment or to provide input on state or regional master plans, or an example would be the IDNR's Wildlife Action Plan. But it's also where we can bring statewide site-specific issues that arise, threats to our natural areas from development or things like that, that we want to build some energy or some awareness around, or think strategically about how to respond and how to solve some of these issues. So that kind of lays out our weeks 1 through 4, and I think that's also the last slide. This is relatively new. We just presented it to our Wednesday morning crew, actually at noon. It's no longer a Wednesday morning crew. It's now a Wednesdays at noon. The other thing we really wanted to do was make these meetings accessible to people who it may not be thinking about conservation strategy, policy, advocacy may not be part of their regular jobs, whether they're working for a CW agency or not. And so we moved them to noon to make them accessible to people who, to try to build some of that coalition and some of that expertise. So we're hoping that makes them a little more accessible, and that we can, now that we have a little more strategic focus about what we're doing, that we can welcome more people to the various coalition meetings. So, and that's all that I think I have to present, and I don't think there's another slide. But if there are any questions or comments, I'll happily entertain them.
Well, this is Paul Botts. Thank you, Amy. That's a great summary. And as you already know, I'm pretty fired up about this. Folks on the call may not know I am a PSCC board, actually officer, but also a member of that policy committee, which is a new committee. And, you know, we've been struggling to sort of figure out what's the real value added, focused way for PSCC as it grows and expands itself and its membership beyond land trusts, to really become part of this without duplicating the great work that IEC and a couple other organizations do in Springfield. And this structure here has a lot of benefits, it seems to me, and one of them is that what folks like Amy or Lindsay Keeney or Ashley Maybanks, who many of you know, who are really kind of much more in the business of working legislation, when they talk about power building, you know, they're talking about building ongoing relationships and connections, and therefore trust with decision makers outside of when we're trying to actually get them to do something. And frankly, you know, a lot of the parties or sectors that are often trying to oppose our priorities and desired changes do that. And I certainly learned this as a policy newbie these last couple of years or sessions, working on the wetlands bill. But it needs to be systematic, and it needs to be not just when you're asking them to do something. Folks on the call remember but it's a lift, and it's, you know, but the best, most authentic way to do it is to have the local or regional organizations and people who aren't the registered lobbyists be the ones building these relationships. And we have not done that very well in Illinois in our sector. It's done much better in some other states, including some of our neighbor states. It's done better, as I mentioned, by some of the folks that we often are across the table against. But there need to be a structure and a party, a network statewide to really take that on. So at the PSCC upcoming board meeting, which is March 5th, in connection with the 20th anniversary annual meeting down at the southern part of the state, this will be on the table, and I predict that it will be enthusiastically adopted as sort of the new charge and focus of that policy committee as part of this really cohesive strategic structure of information sharing that Amy just described. So we're pretty fired up about it, and I think like this could be a real step forward for our sector, really the whole state.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Amy. Does anybody else? Emily?
I just have a kind of a dumb question. How are people invited? How do they know about it? Is it one big email calendar invite to all people who care about nature in the state? Or how does that work?
That was one of the things. So in the past, like it started as a pretty informal, like people would just say, hey, you should invite so and so. And I had a Word document where I was keeping track of people's email addresses and they would get an invitation. So that's how they got invited. But Ted and I have had conversations about having utilizing the tools and the platforms that we have through Chicago Wilderness and other coalition partners to put this information out there. It's part of why we need to get a little more organized and be able to think about how we are inviting people and what they're invited to. And so I think it will be open. It will be on the CW website, on meeting calendars. They'll be running minutes and notes and agendas so that people can catch up. So that's really kind of how we're thinking about it. If you have suggestions, we're open to it though.
Yeah, and I wanted to add that I will work, we were gearing towards that, and I will work with Amy and Ted to get these on our calendar as soon as we get that next step. But today was a big step. So thank you. It was really actually great, Amy, to see the visualizations, and both of you, thanks for your work to put that together.
Ted did a great job of putting together the visuals of like our meetings, of saying like we kind of just kept dumping information at him, and he did a great job of making it make some sense. So
thank you, Amy. Thank you, Ted. And again, it's great that this initiative's pulling everyone towards some common conversations into action. And what I'm going to move into next is going to take it a little bit further here, because everyone is probably very familiar that we do have a government community relations group as well. And we do take, action alerts that partners can place through our website, to where we'll share information that's happening across the 4-state region. And what I want to do now is take some time just to have a little bit of conversation, because right now it looks as if that other group is focused with an Illinois broad Chicago wilderness. But again, we represent 4 states, and we know we're just coming off of things that are happening at the federal level. We had Inauguration Day on Monday. We have obviously elections that'll be up and coming within our various states, and issues and threats. And so we thought this would be a great opportunity, even on the local level, for partners to share and kind of be a place to deposit and have this on our regular seated quarterly agenda of items that we see as emerging threats that we need to be aware of, so that we can direct that and how it relates to our GVI, or opportunities that by working together, we could pull this through and thread it through our various GVI groups, and just to keep our attention on it. So I don't want to duplicate what the other group is doing, but I see this as larger as opportunities. As one example, I think it worked very effectively. We saw here in the Chicagoland area, I can speak for the McHenry County Conservation District and our other open space agencies, obviously taking after the Cook County Forest Preserve District, we had 4 successful ballot measures, putting a lot of investment back in, and that was made possible through coalition building, the support of our partners, and grateful for everyone that was able to help us advance as well and make a big impact. That was an opportunity, and by sharing shared language and resources, we were able to get that done. So what are some other areas that, one, we should be emerging and tracking and being aware of, or what are some opportunities? And we heard today from Tim too, there were things from the agricultural area, a lot of ideas that he landed with us to think about. Ted.
I will start off by saying a lot of the articles in my newsfeed and a lot of the studies that I've been reading scientifically online have shown that we have already surpassed the 1.5C mark as identified in the Paris Accords. And for the second time in 12 years, we are no longer a member of those Paris Accords. So that means that we're seeing things accelerate at a lot quicker pace than we thought we did. And I think this applies really to all the goal groups. And this is why we're sort of focusing on data and climate and CAPN to sort of shine a spotlight not only on these issues, because most of the resources are going to transportation and energy, quite rightly. But I think we all feel that there is room for adaptive solutions that do and can lead to mitigation. I think some of the stuff that Tim was talking about in terms of a regional marketplace certainly has emissions repercussions, and we should be thinking about that not just in ag but in all the goal groups, and that's where I think over the last couple of years we've sort of started to go. But facing what we're facing as of this week, I think it's going to be a real heavy lift, and that's where I'll start opening the conversation. Not to be too Debbie Downer.
Thank you, Ted. Anyone else have examples or areas of focus, emerging threats or opportunities?
I don't know if there's, I read the paper every day. I don't know how many people still do that, but I was kind of aware of the fact that of all the kind of day one actions that the Trump administration did, none of the newspaper articles were around the climate or nature-based actions that he took. And so I don't know if there's some sort of coordinated approach we want to take as a community to increase awareness of the repercussions of some of these, what I'm sure will be clawbacks of environmental protections or others. I'm sure some will go to the forefront of the media consciousness on their own, but is there any kind of strategic approach we could take as a coalition to ensure that these things are in the public consciousness more? I don't know if I'm even talking well or people get it.
Thank you, Emily. So keeping that conversation out in the forefront and helping to be a leader in that discussion. So that's an opportunity for us.
I think building on Emily's excellent point, it's revealing connections, right? That may be obvious to us, but may not be obvious to everyone, right? As a case in point, I was talking to my ex-wife yesterday, and she was fuming about how there are no eggs in the marketplaces right now, right? Not only have we heard that egg prices are high and they're not coming down, apparently on day one, but but they seem to be not on market shelves because of avian flu, number one. And number two, I just read that Canada is having an issue with, it's not E. coli, but the other one. So that's severely limiting the issue of eggs. And we all know how climate change exacerbates invasive species, health outbreaks, infectious diseases, and all of that. So I think it's connecting those dots for people where we can and how we can.
Thank you, Ted. Yes, Adam.
I was just thinking, with this coalition, it's so big and has such a wide, diverse group of really important organizations. It might be great to think about how the goal groups think about the more local environmental protection laws, where we might be depending on federal laws right now that we need to maybe strengthen some of our county level, even municipal level zoning, land use, regulations and things like that, that might help fill the gap if the higher level regulations are weakened.
Thank you. Great perspective.
Bill Miller.
Yeah, I was thinking, along the lines of what Ted's saying about sharing that information. I think it's really important to also give people hope in some way. I mean, I follow some of the things that Catherine Hayhoe posts, and she's always got some good news and some bad news, but also recognizing that if you just hear the problems, you can try and you can retreat into a shell. So if we're going to promote issues, we should try and promote potential solutions as well. How could people get involved? How can we do it? I know that's harder than the other, but if we don't give people a roadmap of where to go, I'm not sure what the information is going to do for them.
Good points, Bill. Thank you for sharing.
Vince?
Yeah, and I think I've alluded to this in the past. I still think that a missing component is the public works sector, MWRD, some of those, big organizations that have money. They need to look at their own carbon footprint kinds of things. And I just think that we should probably put our heads together to try to figure out how to get some strategic partners on the, because we're all pretty much part of the choir, which it's a nice choir. But at the same time, I think we need to expand into the realities of stormwater management and that sort of day-to-day stuff that, we could probably provide some, excellent resources for it, but also the getting them in and buy-in from sort of an outside organization or two is probably something that's worthwhile considering.
Thanks, Vince. Anyone else? Anything that's happening in the different other states, Indiana, that's critical, Wisconsin, Michigan?
I mean, I can, yeah, I guess it's worth just chiming in that we might be getting some Illinois counties in Indiana, if any of you might have read that. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, there's a lot. There's just so much stuff going on. I've had a few conversations with people recently about data centers. Those are coming to our region, which plays into kind of technology, definitely some policy at the local level. We have right now, which totally threw several of us off guard in Indiana, there is a state representative that is put forth legislation for a farmland preservation bill in the state. So if you would have asked me about that a month ago, I'd be like, yeah, that's not happening anytime soon. So I do think what was mentioned by Adam about kind of how do you locally influence change is critical right now. There's a lot of municipalities that are looking at more robust comprehensive plans, quality of life, and I think we just have to zero in on what we can be doing in the Chicago Wilderness region. And yeah, there's just so much stuff happening that it's hard to really assess all the threats and opportunities right now.
Thank you, Chris, for sharing that. Good thoughts.
I think it was Emily and then Nathaniel for the next two.
I was just going to say, kind of going to what Amy and Ted and everybody from the policy front has come into it, like if this structure works in Illinois, potentially partnering on the Indiana side with Andrea Huntington and some of the land trusts on the Indiana side. I know she's been doing a lot of great work, both on the policy front, and Chris can probably speak more to it than I can, as well as the land protection work, to see if something can be done with Chicago Wilderness there too. The other thing I thought was kind of speaking to the conservation ballot wins and millions of dollars being funneled into our forest preserve and conservation districts is I think it would be interesting for Chicago Wilderness, and maybe it's a collaboration with PSCC and the Indiana Land Protection Alliance as well, and others to host a conservation finance kind of mini workshop series or retreat, because a lot of these municipal policy kind of legislative actions could also create finance mechanisms for land trusts like ourselves to fund this work. Just with a lack of philanthropic dollars, I think in our region, we should also be looking at other levers of financing in the future, and that could be one of them to kind of get our knowledge and capacity up on some of these other opportunities.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Emily. Nathaniel.
Yeah, and adding to that, Andrea is a rock star, and I'm so happy that Indiana has her where she is. Sorry, Chris, that you lost her. You didn't lose her, she just moved. But anyway, I was just gonna add, like, I live in the town of Porter and just met with we just developed a sustainability commission. The town did, and they're revisiting what we can do, what policies we can put in place, what policies do we have in place where we can implement them. But just understanding that kind of what Adam said, really targeting that as local as possible and growing out from there. And I mean, that's like not being able to fall asleep last night. That's the only thing that keeps me moving, is knowing that there is hope in our communities.
Any other voices, thoughts? I know one that's come across too, we've seen, and particularly where Chicago Wilderness Alliance has been with our social justice, equity, and ensuring that conservation is accessible to all. And we're seeing some changes relative to DEI and how we stay fluid in our growth of building that we represent all the communities that we serve. And I know we're so diverse within the region, but I think that's something for us too, where are we, again, continuing on the pathway that we've been on, of it being very important as an inclusive alliance. Do I see any other hands? Ted, and then Mark.
One of the things that I've been thinking about quite a bit lately is, well, we've been through this before, it will look different. And we've lived through sort of 4 years of a very sort of great federally modeled program that had money coming down that we can no longer probably rely on. So I think we are well poised, and we should be looking at those aspects of community, like the folks in this room, to build and strengthen our local bonds, as was mentioned earlier, because I think that's all we have right now. And so local coalitions, local relationships, the give-get of the network of the alliance, and what people get out of this is going to be really, really important, I think, over the next 4 years.
Thank you, Ted. Great, great. And Mark.
I agree with everything that's been said. My point is sort of it's kind of a very different thing. Is maybe you saw the piece, I think it was New Year's Day, about Pembroke Township in Kankakee County and the struggles that newly protected land is facing, or stuff that's already been protected by TNC is facing by off-road vehicles, ATVs, and things like that, and they have a real hard time with policing. And I just saw an hour ago in an email that maybe the Illinois State Police may be coming in to help with some of the policing in that geography, because the local governments aren't up to it. Maybe it's not the place for conservation entities to do it. It seems to be a real potential gap, and just it strikes me as a possible interest area to share best practice or who's experienced this problem elsewhere and what do you do about it, and for the folks in Pembroke to tell their story. And in thinking about that, I'm also thinking back to Tim's presentation. Boy, it'd be great if we had more Kankakee County representation here. And maybe this is a moment, to Adam's point, as we think about localities, for the Alliance to maybe double down on some of the outer collar counties that haven't been very engaged. I think some of these issues, farmland issues, new development pressures, changing energy use and things like that might really be compelling to folks. So maybe this is a moment to think about expanding our recruiting of some of those partners that are in our boundary, but not really actively engaged. So that's actually two things.
Thank you, Mark. All right, so good discussion. Again, hopefully this was helpful. We'll keep kind of the threads coming through, but be thinking about in future meetings, should something come up, definitely go ahead, reach out to us and put something on that advocacy alert so that we can kind of focus all the partners along with that, but also areas as we work through our GVI work with the teams, and ensure that some of these areas that can be picked up by the groups or the organizations and get them sourced out appropriately. Thank you for that. All right, Laura, I'm going to turn it over to you for Managing Director's report.
We've previewed our CWA storefront, and Lake has been constantly reviewing that and updating that. So if you haven't had a chance to buy a stocking cap for a day like today, please go check it out. We're in the process of working on our annual report. We have a few preview facts and figures to share with you. And as was mentioned, partnership renewals are coming in. It is slower on a Congress year, and that's actually on my shoulders as we do the individual outreach and work with you all to get your renewals paid. I will be reaching out to many of you and your organizations this week. But if there are others that you feel to this conversation who are missing from this conversation, who you would like to suggest that we do outreach to, we want to continue to grow the voices around the table. And, this isn't based on partnership dues. This is based on having all of those voices as part of these types of discussions. So please do reach out to me with any suggestions of organizations and community groups and municipalities and representatives at those municipalities that we might want to consider reaching out to. I also wanted to mention that this is an Excellence in Ecological Restoration Awards Program accreditation year, as well as the George Rabb Force of Nature Awards. And we will be starting to meet with those teams to share out the information about the criteria and the applications for those. But if you have an interest in serving on that, either as a reviewer or as part of the planning committee, please do reach out to me and let me know that as well. So very quickly, just a few slides. Here is our QR code for the storefront that I mentioned. It's also linked on our website. By the numbers, we are up 22 new partner organizations from 2023. We have increased the number of people involved this year, a total of 630 people. As Ted mentioned, our GVI teams continue to grow, and we're looking for ways to continue to make those meetings more engaging and participatory. There is a Growing with Ag team meeting on Friday at 1 p.m. I know that information was dropped in the chat. I also really would like to invite many of you to join us at University of Wisconsin Parkside next, the 28th, which I think is Tuesday. It is Tuesday, for an in-person meeting of the Managing Healthy Landscapes there, and learning from some of our Wisconsin partners about the work that they're doing in that region. And this is just by the numbers. You'll be seeing this in the annual report, but I want to say that we're really proud of our increases across the board. And in terms of our equity training and participants, the reason those went down this year is partially because we've transitioned to the online phase of our eco-inclusive training. And so people can still register for those, but we're not doing the in-person trainings like we did the year before. But our Indian Country 101 cohorts are smaller, and they are, people that have attended them. I saw Mark put that in the chat. They are really engaging and a really unique perspective that we're all learning from and hoping to continue to put into practice and develop a shared knowledge and language as we work with our partners. So another thing that was really a standout from 2024 was our field days. And these included the Growing with Ag Field Day in Northwest Indiana. I am still thinking about the spearmint production every time I brush my teeth. And our Milwaukee Arborist Apprentice Program that was led by the Urban Tree Canopy Group. We really were able to go across the region, and not only through our Congress. We mentioned already the Calumet region field trip and the Northwest Indiana region, but by going out and spotlighting the amazing work of our partners, I think it's a real learning opportunity for all of us. And I encourage you this year, if you have an idea of a place that you think we should come and visit, whether we do that virtually through a cafe or we go in person to a field day, please also reach out to me and let me know what those are. We're starting to cultivate our cafe and our field trip ideas for this year. Yeah, so that's all I have.
Thank you, Laura, for that great overview. And again, on behalf of the Alliance, I just want to say kudos to you as our managing director, Lake, who has helped us obviously putting together that storefront and all the great promotion of social media and building that, and Maria as our consultant for our communications and everything that everybody does to make it happen. But it's a small and mighty team that keeps things rolling. So thank you. I'm sorry, Laura.
Yes, no, thank you to the team. Yes, I totally agree with that. 100%.
Very grateful. So in the last moments that we have here, this is an opportunity for partners to kind of highlight, showcase what's going on in your world and of information. So anybody that would like to share any upcoming news or opportunities? Hand here, Victoria.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Yes, I just want to let everyone know that the Northwest Indiana Urban Waters Federal Partnership is holding the first quarterly meeting of 2025 tomorrow morning. Apologies, there was an error in the newsletter that was sent out. It is not the 24th, it's the 23rd, which is tomorrow morning. And this will be a wonderful opportunity to catch up on partner accomplishments from 2024 and look ahead to goals for 2025. So I hope you can join us. If you don't receive those calendar invitations or newsletters, please consider sending me an email and I'll get you all signed up.
Thank you, Victoria. Anyone else? Anyone else? Last time, anyone else? All right. Well, wonderful. Thank you for spending the afternoon with us. Our next meeting will be on April 23rd, and it will be an in-person hybrid meeting. So anyone that has any suggestions or is interested in hosting the Alliance, please reach out to Laura or myself. Potentially, it might be an opportunity we used to go and meet at CMAP. So maybe that's an opportunity as well. I think I saw Nora online here too. That was always great to be able to meet there because of access to transportation. Yeah, we would, again, looking forward to having everybody. And then we also hope with that, as we form these agenda items, the presentation works, if you have ideas or you wish to do a spotlight, let us know because we can include that too, the agenda. And then we're looking to maybe do a social, as part of that is in person for those that come out, that we can spend some time socializing together. And again, a lot of ideas and conversations can happen after the meeting as well, building those relationships. So with that being said, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved. Is that Emily? Do I have a second?
Victoria will second.
Victoria second. All right. All those in favor, motion by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. All right. Hearing none, we are adjourned. Thank you so much. Have a
Cheers.
wonderful rest of the
See you
day.
guys.
Stay warm.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.